Some people love Barbie, some people hate Barbie, but the internet collectively cannot stop talking about Barbie. That is why in today's video, we are unpacking whether life in plastic is really all that fantastic. Hello all you wonderful people, welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a slightly different video and talking about the Barbie movie and why you should actually care about it. Now usually when a topic is of interest to me, I like to do these deep dives and read about their history and their impact on current society, but I don't usually create content around it. But this time around, I thought it would be interesting to share that perspective with you guys because I believe that Barbie is a really important film from a cultural and a socio-political standpoint. Also, there might be spoilers, so watch out for those and maybe watch this after you watch the movie. Now, despite the fact that I have grown up playing with the Barbie doll, I had completely forgotten about it up until a few days ago when it was my youngest cousin's birthday and she asked for a Barbie doll as a gift. And I was like, hey, these are still in stores. And when we went to the store to get one for her, by the way, it is this one. She doesn't watch my YouTube videos, so it's alright, we can show it to you. The shelves are still full of Barbie dolls. Now, whether you're somebody like me who has grown up playing with Barbies, or whether you're someone who is a parent to someone who is now playing with Barbies, you cannot deny the cultural impact and significance of the Barbie doll in itself. And I want to give you a little bit of context for this as well. Back in 1959, when this doll was launched, it became a symbol for women's freedom of choice and expression. Before this, all the dolls that used to come out for young girls were baby dolls, were like in the shape and form of babies, and they were actually meant as a way to train young girls to become better mothers or better caregivers. But when the Barbie came about, it became something for the women themselves, something that they didn't have to showcase to society, something that they could do just for themselves by dressing up these Barbies, by playing their fashion, by dressing up their houses. It was all just a freedom of expression for the women of that time. But eventually, as the popularity of the doll grew, more and more clothes for Barbies came out, that symbolism shifted from this freedom of expression for women to promoting this idea of materialism and becoming the poster child of the evils of capitalism. From there, Barbie got called out for promoting unrealistic beauty standards and not having enough diversity in terms of including look and feel of women from ethnically diverse backgrounds. Now, the reason that I'm telling you all of this is because it's important to note the impact on history, on culture, on the image and positioning of women that this children's toy has had. This toy is 6.5 decades old, and in those 6.5 decades, it has been part of every major cultural conversation. It's gone just from being a toy for young girls to being a socio-political and cultural instrument. And that is something that has been reflected very, very well in the Barbie movie as well. So if you see the discussion and the criticism surrounding the film, you can draw a lot of parallels with the discussion and the criticism surrounding the Barbie toy in itself. Because in addition to addressing the criticism that Mattel, the parent company, and the toy itself have faced, what Greta Gerwig has managed to do is bring out all of the problems that women have historically faced and continue to face through the eyes of a doll. And that, I think, is the brilliance of her writing in this film. But besides the good writing, the good screenplay, beautiful acting, what Greta Gerwig has managed to do is give women this feeling of nostalgia, of seeing their favorite toy as a child come to life, but also of seeing their struggles being personified through this iconic doll. From body image issues to facing the male gaze, to not having a voice in important matters, to having existential crisis because of how the world is changing, Greta Gerwig has managed to capture all of those emotions extremely well. And the fact that Margot Robbie, one of the most beautiful women in the world at present, has portrayed this existential dread that all of us face, it's actually been a very healing thing for women to watch on the big screen. Another reason why I think that the film has resonated really well with women is because it brings about a sense of community, not just on screen, where you get to see a lot of female camaraderie in Barbie land itself, but also off screen because we see girl gangs turning up wearing pink to theaters to watch this movie. So even if you don't personally like the film, that sense of camaraderie that comes with going with your whole bunch of friends to watch a film in itself brings about the sense of community. For me personally, the genius of the film lies in the way that Greta Gerwig has written it. right from incorporating the historical context of Barbie, the old costumes, the Barbies that were discontinued, to the iconic body shape, to the arched heel, and incorporating that into the storyline. It's just such a fun take to see. In addition to that, they've actually managed to make Mattel take ownership of promoting unrealistic beauty standards and of promoting their capitalistic agendas. Anybody who's grown up now playing with Barbies can actually relate to a lot of the stuff in the film coming from the perspective of that plaything that we used to have as kids. So the plotline actually ties all of that aspect also very well together in the film. I also personally really like the plotline of what happens when, women come together and the power that they have. It's like sisterhood and female power all wrapped into like a very fun, colorful, bright, vibrant packaging. But this theme of female empowerment is just like one of the things. It's just the tip of the iceberg. The beauty of the film actually lies in its nuance. So when you watch it and when you look back on it, you can actually peel down the layers, and every layer has a different sub-theme, a different character arc, a different plot point. And when all of that comes together, I think that makes for a very fun watch and a very thought-provoking watch as well. For instance, one of my favorite character arcs in the film is the journey of Ryan Gosling's Ken. So he goes from being this wannabe boyfriend for Barbie to being this macho man who loves patriarchy and horses, to discovering that he was doing that because he was hurt, and that he does not really need to depend on Barbie for his own existence, that he is enough. And this self-discovery wala jo plot point hai, that is very persistent throughout the film. It happens for multiple characters, including Barbie, including America Ferrera's character, who's a 30-something mom, and for her daughter, who's this very annoying teenage girl. But all of the jokes, the digs on Mattel, and calling out a spade is actually what makes this a very self-aware film. And I really love that about it, that they were able to break the fourth wall and make the audience aware of the fact that they know what they're talking about. So I think that's where the beauty of this film lies. But despite all of that, it has faced a lot of criticism for being anti-men or promoting a matriarchal setup or showing female power in a negative light. And I want to talk about those for a minute before we get to the meat of the matter. My friends are in the club, we'll go all night. Now, coming to the criticisms, what a lot of people are saying is that in the movie, men are portrayed as ditzy, women are portrayed as having no agency. It is shown that patriarchy is the root of all evil and that matriarchy can solve anything. And women are presented as victims, but also at the same time as oppressors. So if you are getting triggered by any of these, I would really like to have that perspective in the comments and understand what is triggering you, but just please be respectful. Personally, through my eyes and through the eyes of several of my male friends who've seen the movie, it didn't come across as anti-men. But I do understand why it could have been triggering for people. First of all, there's a lot of discussion and debate around patriarchy in the movie itself. The word patriarchy has been mentioned so many times, and several times there were digs taken at patriarchy itself. But just because we're talking about a social construct does not mean that the movie in itself is anti-men. What I saw and what I felt was fascinating was that a parallel was drawn between a society that is run by patriarchs, or it is like male rule, and a society that is run by matriarchs. And we got to see the good and bad sides of both in the movie. So Barbie Land is run by matriarchs. It's all women run, women led, and it's just female empowerment to the extreme. Whereas the real world is a male power to the extreme. And both of these worlds are shown as disbalanced. It's towards the end of the movie when Barbie realizes that, all of this is not right, and Ken realizes that all of this is not right, and they come together in a dialogue and they both understand each other to sort of balance the whole matriarch-patriarch thing and find a middle ground. That is when things become balanced. And when you see this entire journey, you see that it also showcases how patriarchy and matriarchy both affect men. In the film, men are actually portrayed as humane, as having emotions, as being in touch with their feelings. Even Kens in Barbie Land are in touch with their feelings and want to go on this journey of self-discovery because they're bothered by the emotional turmoil. And I think that is a very, very important representation for men to have in a world full of people wanting to be like Andrew Tate and his internet copycats. I feel like a lot of this argument about this film being anti-men comes from people who think that anything that's pro-women is anti-men. Yes, I will say that this film is primarily created for women by a woman. I still think it's for women primarily because of the fact that Barbie was a toy made for young girls in the 1950s, and it's grown to be a toy that is used by young women throughout generations. So just from that perspective alone, I think it's a female-centric film. But just because it is that, just because it shows men as more emotional, I don't think that it is necessarily anti-men. So if you still feel like it's an anti-men film, drop a comment and let me know why you think so. But for now, let's get on to the deeper stuff about why I think it's a very important movie to watch for men, for women, for feminists, for anti-feminists, for just people in general. Probably not kids because they will not understand the cultural subtext and the dialogue that is happening. But for adults, young adults, I think it's an important film to watch. You start me up like no one's ever could. You feel my There guys, the truth is that for all of the self-help, self-love, self-care content that people in the space are creating, none of it has as much impact as a pop culture phenomena that sparks dialogues around these subjects. And Barbie has managed to do that, which is why it's such an important film. One of my favorite themes throughout the movie was actually that of setting boundaries. So throughout the movie, we see Ken making these advances at Barbie and trying to kiss her or get her to like him. And throughout the movie, Barbie keeps saying no. She doesn't look at Ken from that perspective, but the way she says no and the way that she keeps upholding her boundaries is a very inspiring thing to watch. So if you're a young girl watching this movie and this is the first introduction to the concept of boundaries, it shows you how you can be respectful and how you can still uphold your boundaries without being overly aggressive or going out of your way to do so. The second really great thing that this movie touches on is how the male and the female psyche work. I was just reading an article on psychology today written by a male psychotherapist who says that Barbie has actually managed to capture male emotions really well, from jealousy to the ego that fuels their growth. All of that has been portrayed really well. And while that was somewhat of a generalization and not all men function like that, I do agree with the fact that Greta Gerwig's writing has actually managed to portray like those innate emotions that we have of, let's say, insecurity or jealousy or facing existential dread of women not being sure of themselves. All of that has been quite spot on. So it's also like a very beautiful study into how our psyche works. And while I think that movies in general tend to do that, they play on human emotions and human psyche, I think Barbie does it in a more obvious fashion, and that in itself is a very great way to see on screen. And then of course this entire trope of self-discovery and self-love and fulfillment, which is seen throughout the movie and through the different characters. And I think it's more a movie of self-discovery and self-actualization than it is anything else, but of course portrayed through the lens of a doll. Now the discussion around Barbie is important not just from the perspective of what is happening in the film itself, but also from the perspective of the dialogue that this film has sparked outside in the ambit. In a lot of scenarios, I think this is like a very good segue, entryway for people who have never been introduced to the concept of feminism, of female empowerment, of gender roles, to start that conversation. And I think we have a lot of that in India as of now, where we don't talk a lot about this, or there is a huge polarizing gap in the discussions that are happening. I think this movie can mark a very nice segue into these conversations. It's like a starter point for all of these conversations, even though it has overdone some of the parts, like the whole discussion around patriarchy or that whole monologue about women being the victims. It still is a very great conversation starter into all of these topics and can fuel people's interest in these topics so that they research these further. And I think that's a very, very important milestone for a movie to have. And in addition to that, I think it marks a big leap for women in cinema. I think Greta Gerwig has already done a great job of displaying female characters, but with Barbie, the parallels that she's able to draw in the lives of dolls and real women is actually very intriguing. It also sparks this curiosity in your head to delve deeper. Barbie is a movie made by women for women, and that's very evident in the way that it's been written. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing because we don't see it happening very often. Hopefully, this is the start of something like that, and this can lead to much better films being made in the future. And I think it's an equally important film for men to watch so that they can get in on the dialogue, they can understand the female perspective of things when it comes to movies like this, when it comes to other films being made by women. It's important for all of us to understand that just because something puts women in the limelight, it's pro-women, does not mean it's automatically anti-men. And in researching this topic, I also found that whenever we come across discussions on movies in general, most of which are directed by men, the fact that they're directed by men, the fact that they have patriarchal undertones is never questioned. It's because they're given more artistic license. It's only when we have films like these, which are directed by women, which have a majority female cast, that topics like this come under scrutiny. Not discounting all of the things that we have discussed so far, but I think this is something to think about.